Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Laurie Smith on Blog Talk Radio. Good evening. It is 9:30 p.m. here, Calgary, Alberta, and Monday night, August the 30th. This is Child Abuse Prevention and Human Rights Abuse Prevention is Up to Us. 30-minute live internet streaming radio broadcast from blogtalkradio.com. Chat room is open if anybody would like to hang out in there. And I want to continue talking about neglect. And, I don't know how, maybe we'll just finish it up tonight or Wednesday night. But this PDF is awesome. It's from Child Welfare Information Gateway, www.childwelfare, let me get the link for you, .gov/pubs, P-U-B-S, /user manuals, /neglect.pdf. We've been looking at this for a while now, probably for over a week at this PDF. It's 112 pages long. We're just on page 30, so I don't think we're going to cover the whole thing. It's quite a lot of information, but I just wanted to cover the basics, the necessary information that most people need to know, which is the signs and symptoms of neglect, how neglect actually, what the effects are from neglect to a child, children growing up neglected and abused, and, what the effects would be on their lives, and also take a look at some prevention, because that's exactly what we want to do. We want to stop this, I wish I could be doing something else right now, but I decided that if I don't stand up and start speaking out, and everybody doesn't stand up and start speaking out in whatever format they can, whether it's writing or using their voice or, making songs or, whatever it is to get the information out there to people, working in their own communities to help stop child abuse and neglect, right? We have to do this. And until we can stop it, I'm just going to keep on talking. But I really wish that I had something else to do, because then that would be that there was no more neglect and there would be no more child abuse, right? And then I could go on to do something else. I really fight for all human rights abuses, and I'm fighting to stand up for human rights, child rights, and I figure I have nothing better to do with the rest of my time but try to make a difference on this planet. And I just wanted to be one more voice, because I see that's what happened 3.5 years ago. I saw that there was so many people that throughout my whole lifetime that I used to see and admire because of all the work that they were doing to try to help people, and because of the way I grew up, right? Very abusive home and a lot of domestic violence and abuse, right? And I thought, thank God for all these people out here who are doing something to help people. And then I used to sit around and just not think about how I could get involved. It didn't seem to me that it would be something I could do until about 3.5 years ago. And I decided to get proactive, get off the couch, and I said, look at all these people doing all this great work. And then I thought, why am I not doing something? Why am I not saying something? Especially because of the type, the situation I grew up in. I should be doing this. This is something that I felt that I could no longer just sit on the sidelines. I had to get involved, and I'm so glad that I did. But I wish that we could stop child abuse and neglect and all abuses against humanity, and then I could find something better to do, because this is just really actually makes me angry that I have to get on here and do this. But I thank you all for tuning in and listening, because obviously the people who are listening to my shows obviously care a whole lot about the situation, or they wouldn't be listening. And I thank you so much for tuning into all my shows. It means a lot to me, and I almost have 10,000 shows listened to now. And I check my numbers, periodically through the week, and when I'm on my page, and I'm almost at 10,000 listens. So somebody's listening to my shows, and I thank you so much for being here and listening to me ramble on day after day after day. And so I want to continue looking at neglect. I'm not a professional counselor or therapist. I don't hold any certificates in that area. I'm actually the Canada Regional Director for Dreamcatchers for Abused Children. I'm an advocate standing up to promote awareness, education, prevention of child abuse and neglect, and just really just want to be one more voice, right? So I'm just a private citizen, really, paying to do my own shows. And I believe that education is the key. Nothing's going to change as long as we keep it hidden away. Nothing's going to change as long as we don't talk about it. If abuse is silenced, then nothing will change. As long as the abusers continue to be able to do what they do, and the victims stay silent, and of course children just don't have a voice, period, then, abuse will continue on. We all have to speak up, and we all have to speak out against this. And until we do, not much will change. But there's a lot of voices, and I'm just joining right behind all these voices that have already been out here for the last, few hundred years, people really speaking out and putting their lives on the line to do it. And I'm glad to join them in the ranks, to just be one more voice, just to say we have to change this for these children. And I see a lot of change coming, and I see that things are happening, and it's just amazing, because I believe that we're going to get programs rolling out nationwide, and it will happen. And I believe that it's going to be sooner than later. So I do believe that we are going to be able to make a huge difference for these children out here, and sadly enough, not tonight. And this breaks my heart. But the sooner the better, right? Because these poor children do not deserve this, and these people who can't cope and have these children need help, because they kill their children, they murder their children, they abuse their children in these horrific ways because they themselves are so screwed up that they needed help so long ago, you know what I mean, or sterilization or something. I'm sorry, but you know what? People have no right to abuse a child. Children have rights. That's what I'm here to do. Stand up for these children's rights. That's what I do. I fight for child rights. I will continue to fight for child rights until the day that I drop. So it's important that we all get involved. Children have rights. They have the right to life, to a good life. They have the right to health care. They have the right to a loving home. They have the right to live an abuse-free life. They have the right to government, to education, to play. They have the right to religion. They have the right to their own heritage. They have the right to happiness and joy and to seek their life. And people snuff their lives out. These monsters, parents, caregivers, child sexual predators, strangers, just taking these children's lives out, and they have no business doing that. We have to stand up for these children, and if we don't, who's going to do it, right? So that's why I do these shows. Thank you very much for tuning in. And if you're a young person under the age of 18, I just ask that you get permission to listen to my shows. There's a lot of adult content on my shows. The topics of abuse, are very sensitive, and people, a lot of people, if they haven't heard a whole lot about abuse, they might find it very sensitive, and you need to, as a young person, have someone listen to the show with you to make sure that it's something that you should be listening to, and then, then if you have questions, they can help you, right, to find the information. So we're going to look at this PDF, and it's, I'll read what the title is, and I'll let you know where it came from. Child Abuse and Neglect User Manual Series. It's called Child Neglect, A Guide for Prevention, Assessment, and Intervention. And it was put out by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Administration for Children and Families, Administration on Children, Youth, and Families, Children's Bureau, Office on Child Abuse and Neglect, and it can be found at www.childwelfare.gov /pubs, P-U-B-S, /user manuals, /neglect.pdf. You can go there and check this out. It's a great PDF, and there's all kinds of good information on it. Child Neglect was put out by, this actual PDF was put out by Diane DePanfilis, DePanfilis, and this was in 2006. So it's not all that old. It's not all that old of information. Some of the stuff that's out there is from, I don't know, 1994, you know what I mean? So this is actually kind of current. It's not all that old. And it's some good information. I think it's very inclusive, and it just covers really everything. I think tonight we're going to talk about the impacts of neglect. And we sort of left off talking about what is neglect. And now I want to take a look at, the emotional neglect, physical neglect, right? This next section is, and then they have the signs of possible neglect, right? And we did look at that on Monday night. I'm sorry, on Friday night, because it's Monday now. So let's get our days straight here. Let's see. I want to look next at the impact of neglect on a child, right? What the impact of it is. It's absolutely huge. Neglect is really the most common form of abuse, right? So quite often people, you'll hear child abuse and neglect, right? It should be lumped in there with it. But the thing is quite often people just don't throw in neglect because it's just child abuse. They just consider it to be part of the whole thing. But it's actually child abuse and neglect. And neglect is actually the more common of all of it, and it's deadly. Neglect can kill a child just as well as physical abuse. Can kill a child just as well as any of the other types of abuse. It's very harmful and very damaging for children. And sadly enough, so many children are neglected. And just, let alone the worldwide, but in North America, it shouldn't be happening, United States and Canada, with the resources that we have. But it's just that, for so many children do not have access to these resources because their parents or caregivers are not getting them what they need, and they're not able to provide what they need. Maybe they want to, they just don't know who to contact, how to get help. sometimes they're just slip through the cracks, right? And this is unfortunate. This is a human life we're talking about. It's not just a number, not just a statistic, right? Impact of neglect is chapter 3 in this PDF, and it says, the impact of neglect on a child may not be apparent at an early age except in the most extreme cases. However, the effects of neglect are harmful and possibly long-lasting for the victims. Its impact can become more severe as the child grows older and can encompass multiple areas, including health and physical development, intellectual and cognitive development, emotional and psychological development, and social and behavioral development. So really everything, it encompasses the whole life of this child, right? It's absolutely horrible what happens to children. It says, although there are 4 categories of neglect effects on an individual, they often are related. For example, if a child experiences neglect that leads to a delayed development of the brain, this may lead to cognitive delays or psychological problems, which may manifest as social and behavioral problems, right? So yes, of course, it's all the way through, and it all affects. Each one is kind of part of the whole thing, right? Because neglected children often experience multiple consequences that may be the result of neglect and related circumstances in their lives, it may be difficult to determine if the impact is related specifically to the neglect, or is caused by another factor, or arises from a combination of the factors. So the impact of neglect can vary based on, and they list this off here, the child's age, the presence and strength of protective factors, the frequency, duration, and severity of the neglect, and also the relationship between the child and caregiver. So it says the negative impacts of neglect are often associated with the various outcomes children experience in the child welfare system. For example, some of the developmental and health problems linked to neglect are related to higher rates of placement in out-of-home care, a greater number of out-of-home placements, longer out-of-home placements, and a decreased likelihood of children residing with their parents when discharged from foster care. So this is hard on children, absolutely. Now, I never ended up in foster care. I was threatened to be put into foster care, but I don't know what it would be like. I did have some friends who were put into foster care, and they didn't seem all that happy about it. I've talked to people since then in my adult life, and especially now doing what I do for Dreamcatchers for Abused Children, have seen lots and lots of horrible stuff about foster care. But we also know, I've read some articles about some awesome foster parents. So there are some good foster parents out there. There's some good foster homes. And then, of course, there's the bad foster homes. It's kind of like life. There's good and there's bad, right? There's no perfect system, and it's really unfortunate because who pays the price for this? These children do. And that's sad, right? Just because they get allocated to one foster home that happens to be abusive or neglectful, and so the child just experiences more abuse, more neglect, right? More neglect, which is sad because, the other kid just by chance gets placed into a foster home with loving, caring foster parents who do care and do the best they can to help that child. And so it's just sad that the roll of the dice, just plays it out for these children and the rest of their lives. And that's unfortunate. We need to change this, and we really need something has to happen. And I believe that this younger generation coming up here are going to be able to make that difference. I really do, because I think there's a lot of people out here who really care and are really fighting. I see them all, I know not all of them. I just see a handful of them, but I see a large portion of people are very interested in seeing this change, right? So let's hope so, because these poor kids, they just don't deserve it, right? They go on to talk about that. They said studies supporting the idea of a sensitive developmental period show that maltreated infants suffer from greater developmental disabilities than those children who were maltreated later in childhood. So one example of this is the ability to form attachments with one's primary caregiver. And it says if this process is disrupted early in children's lives, they may have difficulty forming healthy relationships throughout their lives. And although learning can happen throughout life, it often is more difficult for children who were deprived of certain types of early stimulation. So, yeah, we see lots and lots about that. The earlier the abuse starts, and the longer it goes on, it's very detrimental to the child, especially if it starts in infancy and it just continues on. And I'm a prime example. So, my family, not just me, right? My siblings as well. So, absolutely horrible what happens to children. And, depending on the duration and how long this stuff happens, it really has a huge impact on children's lives. So health and physical development. Studies show that neglected children can be at risk for many physical problems, including failure to thrive, severe diaper rash and other skin infections, recurrent and persistent minor infections, malnourishment, impaired brain development. Because neglect includes medical neglect, other health problems can arise from the failure of the parents to obtain necessary medical care for their children. That happened in my family. If children do not receive the proper immunizations, prescribed medications, necessary surgeries, or other interventions, there can be serious consequences, such as impaired brain development or poor physical health. And the impact of a delay in or lack of treatment might be noticeable immediately or may not appear for several weeks, months, or even years. For example, a child who does not receive proper dental care might be all right in the short term but suffer from tooth decay and gum disease later in life. And children with diabetes may be fine without treatment for a short while, but an extended delay in treatment could have serious consequences and possibly result in death. And that's the whole issue. This is serious stuff. This is not just, somebody doesn't want to give the kid a toy, they just call that neglect. We're talking, this is very serious, this stuff, right? When parents do not provide what these children need to live and to for their physical development, for their emotional development, for their psychological well-being, right? And we see so many people mistreating their children. It's absolutely ridiculous. It's just these children suffer greatly for it, right? And it's bad. They then grow up to be adults who, not always, but some will go on to do the same thing with their children if they have them, or they just won't thrive and they won't do well as adults unless they get some help, right? Or do some serious self-help, you know what I mean? And a lot of them don't make it, you know what I mean? And that is just so sad, right? Every child deserves a chance to have a good life and, at least a good start, right? So that's why we have to really look out for this and know the signs and symptoms of neglect, right? And if we know of a child in our own lives, in our own families especially, or somebody, a neighbor, you see a neighbors on the street who are having a hard time and their kids look, they show the signs of neglect, symptoms and signs of neglect, you have to do the right thing and make the phone call. Because chances are they won't remove the child from the home unless it's absolutely unsafe for the child to be there. And then, of course, you'd be saving that child's life. But what it will do is it will alert the authorities to keep an eye on them and to try to get them some help. And even though we know the system's not perfect, because, I'm a prime example, I'm a living example here to tell people that the system doesn't half the time work. But the thing is, better than not making the phone call and then finding out, 2-3 weeks later or 3 months later, they're finding, headlines in the paper, oh, kid's been killed. I would say it's the law, And not only we shouldn't be making a phone call just because it's the law. We should be making a phone call because we care about these kids. And, they'll hopefully have somebody step in, a counselor, a family counselor, somebody to try to get these people some help. Because quite often parents just don't know the resources they don't even have a clue what kind of resources would be available to them if they went and actually made a phone call. And they're so generally sometimes uneducated, and it's not necessarily their fault, but they just don't get the information. Something just doesn't click with them, and they don't realize that there's help out there. And so they let their family suffer, which is what my parents did. And they'll just let their family suffer and thinking that that's the way life is, right? And so it's unfortunate because these kids, who pays the price? These kids do. I mean, I don't care about the adults in the situation. That's their own stupidity and their own fault for not getting the information. But the kids pay the price for this, right? And it's not their fault, and they don't deserve it, and we have to look out for them, right? And it says here, they said, in some cases, child neglect has been associated with a failure of the brain to form properly, which can lead to impaired physical, mental, and emotional development. The brain of a child who has been maltreated may develop in such a way that it is adaptive for the child's negative environment, but it is maladaptive for functional or positive environments. A maltreated child's brain may adapt for day-to-day survival, but may not allow the child to develop fully healthy cognitive and social skills. So in one study, neglected children had a highest proportion of later diagnosis of mental retardation, which may be due to not getting the necessary care and stimulation from proper brain development. And children who are neglected early in life may remain in a state of hyperarousal. in which they are constantly anticipating threats, or they may experience disassociation with decreased ability to benefit from social, emotional, and cognitive experiences. To be able to learn, a child's brain needs to be in a state of attentive calm, which is rare for maltreated children. If a child is unable to learn new information, this may cause some areas of the brain to remain inactive, possibly resulting in delayed or stunted brain growth. It also can impair functioning later in life and may lead to that child being anxious, getting overly aggressive, or being withdrawn. So children who have experienced global neglect, defined as neglect in more than one category, so like, physical neglect, emotional neglect, the whole gamut of neglect, right, may have significantly smaller brains than the norm. And this could be indicative of fewer neuronal pathways available for learning, and may lead the children to be at an intellectual disadvantage for their entire lives. And that's just horrible. I mean, that's just setting those kids up to fail, to have these complications and just all kinds of disadvantages. And this is what we see a lot of times. And this is really sad because, all they needed was some help. And the parents just needed to get some help for their children and for themselves, right? And the parents sometimes are so ignorant that they don't know, and then they don't get help, right? And it's very, very sad because these children pay the price, and of course, just the cycle of abuse and neglect just keeps on going, right? Poor physical health. It says the physical problems associated with neglect may start even before an infant is born, such as when the mother has had little or no prenatal care or smoked during pregnancy. That's me, thank you. These children may be born prematurely, yes, and have complications at birth. Absolutely. I had, I came into the world just under 3 pounds. Was it an incubator? I don't weigh that now, let me tell you. But yeah, my mom did not look after herself, and she lost 2 before me. And then there was one before my sister, so she had 3 stillborn babies, and then I was dying, and they had to take me out early, and so I was about 2.5 months early, and ended up in an incubator, and I was really sick because my mom was not looking after herself, and the abuse that was going on in that home at the time was probably just ridiculous. It's a miracle I made it. And this is a situation, right, when parents are not getting care, that the mother is not getting the care that she needs, she's not eating properly. Quite often in that situation where there is neglect and there are problems, the parents, or the mother will not be taking care of herself. And even though my mom was not a drug user, she was this was back in the 60s, right? Even she was an older woman born in the 20s. So, she was not a drug user, but she was smoking cigarettes, probably 2 packs a day, and staying up all night drinking coffee and fighting with my dad. And it's just a miracle that I made it, right? This is the whole thing, right? Children, coming in like that, there's all kinds of complications that can arise, right? And I think it's just a miracle that I'm actually here. And, it truly is, because they had to take me out, or both of us would have died. They said, had they not taken me when they did, I would have died and my mom would have died. So that's how serious the situation was. And I think she was letting herself go because she didn't want to have any more children, right? And that's just the whole thing. Incredibly hard on people. Absolutely hard on people. And I've had health problems my whole life. If people could do a study, they'd probably find that there's all kinds of things that are related to that, right? And it's hard on children, absolutely. It says these children may be born prematurely and have complications at birth. Neglected children also can have severe physical injuries, possibly due to the inattention of their parents, such as central nervous systems and craniofractal injuries, fractures, and severe burns. They also may be dirty and unhygienic, leading to even more health problems, such as lice or infections. And children also may be exposed to toxins that could cause anemia, cancer, heart disease, poor immune functioning, and asthma. For example, exposure to indoor and outdoor air pollutants such as ozone, particulate matter, and sulfur dioxide can cause the development of asthma or increase the frequency and severity of asthma attacks. Additionally, children may have health problems due to a lack of medical attention for injury or illness, and including chronic health problems. Neglected children may suffer from dehydration or diarrhea that can lead to more severe problems if unattended. And a medical condition associated with child neglect is failure to thrive, which can be defined as children whose growth deviates significantly from the norms for their age and gender. And this condition typically occurs in infants and toddlers under the age of 2 years. Failure to thrive can be manifested as significant growth delays as well as, and they list here, poor muscle tone, unhappy or minimal facial expression, decreased vocalization, and general unresponsiveness. And that's sad. Failure to thrive can be caused by organic or non-organic factors, but some doctors may not make such a sharp distinction between physical and behavioral causes that often appear together. It says with organic failure to thrive, the child's delayed growth can be attributed to a physical cause, usually a condition that inhibits the child's ability to take in, digest, or process food. And when failure to thrive is a result of the parent's neglectful behavior, it is considered non-organic. And treatment for failure to thrive depends on the cause of the delayed growth and development as well as the child's age, overall health, and medical history. For example, delayed growth due to nutritional factors can be addressed by educating the parents on an appropriate and well-balanced diet for the child. Additionally, parental attitudes and behavior may contribute to a child's problems and need to be examined. And in many cases, the child may need to be hospitalized initially to focus on implementation of a comprehensive medical, behavioral, and psychological treatment plan. Yeah, just to try to save that child's life, right? Because if they don't step in, then the child's going to die. We see stuff in the headlines all the time, failure to thrive, children dying, failure to thrive, whether or not it was the parent's fault, organic or non-organic, right? And it's very sad. Sometimes, the parents did all they could, and the child still failed to thrive and just died, right? And that's very sad. But what's worse, what's wrong and has to stop is parents who don't get their children any help and are actually the cause of the child failing to thrive. And that's abuse. It's murder, really, in my book. And it's got to stop. So then they go on to talk about the intellectual and cognitive development. Research shows that neglected children are more likely to have cognitive deficits and severe academic and developmental delays when compared with non-neglected children. And when neglected children enter school, they may suffer from both intellectual and social disadvantages that cause them to become frustrated and fall behind. And one study found that individuals at 28 years of age who suffered from childhood neglect scored lower on IQ and reading ability tests when controlling for age, sex, race, and social class than people who were not neglected as children. And other studies have found that although both abused and neglected children exhibited language delays or disorders, the problems were more severe for neglected children. Furthermore, neglected children have the greatest delays in expressive and receptive language when compared with abused and non-maltreated children. And when compared to physically abused children, neglected children have academic difficulties that are more serious and show signs of greater cognitive and socio-emotional delays at a younger age. So these academic difficulties may lead to more referrals for special education services. So that's interesting. So neglect is actually harder on a child for the academic and social behavioral type things than abuse is. It says here, that's really something. We only have a few minutes left here, but they've got a little spot here where they talk about, it's like a little section, impact of neglect on academic performance. Neglect can negatively affect a child's academic performance. Studies have found that children placed in out-of-home care because of abuse or neglect have below average levels of cognitive capacity, language development, and academic achievement. Neglected children demonstrated a notable decline in academic performance upon entering junior high school. And children who were physically neglected were found to have significantly lower IQ scores. And neglected children, when compared with non-maltreated children, scored lower on measures of overall school performance. And it does have a huge effect on children, absolutely. It's horrible. So we have about a minute left, so we'll finish this off probably Wednesday night, and then we'll start up a new topic, and we'll see. Maybe we might take it to Friday's show as well. We'll see what else is here. Maybe I want to get into the prevention side of neglect, right? So thanks, everybody, for tuning in. Have a great night, and I'll be back on tomorrow morning, one child abuse survivor to another. We're talking about toxic shame and moving on to rage and anger and rage and shame. And have a great night, everybody. Take care of yourselves. If you need something, get a hold of me on Blog Talk Radio, Facebook, and whatnot. I'll be around. And be sure and catch the show tomorrow at Dreamcatchers Talk Radio, www.blogtalkradio.com/Dreamcatchers. It'll be Janelle Matula and myself. Janelle Matula is the South Central Regional Director for Dreamcatchers for Abused Children, and myself will be bringing the headlines talking about the headlines that are out there and discussing some of these horrific stories that are happening right now as we speak. It's absolutely horrible. So we got to stop this and make sure you know the signs and symptoms and make the phone call. Be the eyes and the ears for these children out here, and we can save children's lives, right? So make sure you get the information and know how to report child abuse and know how to, to spot the signs and symptoms of all the different types of child abuse, right? Check our website out, www.dreamcatchersforabusedchildren.com, or just, you don't even have to do the www, just http dreamcatchersforabusedchildren.com. Thanks, everybody. Have a great night, and we'll be talking to you real soon. Bye-bye.